Hey everybody, this is Draymond. Today we have a see here, 8-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It helps the channel a lot. Really do appreciate it. So this particular slate does have a pretty good pitching selection. In fact, I think it's gonna be a low-scoring slate from a batting perspective, as the pitchers look really good today. We do have some players that we do like those, so it's not like we're devoid of them, but it's definitely more of a pitcher slate than we've had in a while. We've had a few of those lately, but this one definitely jumps off the page as a very good pitching slate. It does look like all the weather issues will be fine today, even though there are a couple games that have some potential. I don't think that those things are going to be too much today. So let's go ahead and get into the slate. Before I get started, though, could you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It helps the channel out. I really do appreciate it. Let's go ahead and look at our pitchers. So my top overall pitcher is Pablo Lopez from Minnesota. He's facing Washington, who's one of the weaker teams on the slate. He's been pretty solid so far this season. He's got a good strikeout rate, and he's been got a high ceiling, though he does have a lower floor than some of the other options. He's had some really rough games throughout the season, but he does have high ceiling in this game, so he's definitely worth a look. Framber Valdez for Houston's the other top tier option, I think, today, as he has really good strikeout upside here. He's been fairly priced as well, and he should be able to get over 20 fantasy points against the Angels, who really do struggle lately. I do think he's a viable play, and he definitely has some good upside in this matchup. Also, uh, Yamamoto for the Dodgers. He's facing Arizona, who's a little bit tougher team, but he has some good upside here. He scored 23 fantasy points against them last time he played them, and he is a little bit overpriced though for that kind of score, but he definitely has good upside potential here as well. Even though Arizona is a decent team, at times they do struggle sometimes, and I do think they'll struggle more against him today. Hopefully, he can have a 25 plus fantasy point game at this price point. So those are my top three. I think Yamamoto is more of a GPP play though, so do keep that in mind. But I do think that all of them are good. So then we're going to look at Tanner Hoke for Boston. Now he has a tough matchup against Tampa Bay, and he's been inconsistent with the strikeouts. But he has enough upside here to do decent. He scored 19 fantasy points last time out versus Tampa Bay as well, so I think he can get a little bit better this time. But I do think he's a viable option on this slate. Sonny Gray is a good GPP play, though he's fairly expensive, and he's got a tough matchup against Baltimore, who has been absolutely phenomenal so far this season. But he's been really good as well. He's only had one off game on the season so far, and that was against Milwaukee. So now Milwaukee is a team that's pretty similar in Baltimore in their capability. So I do think that Baltimore is a tough matchup. But he's also done well against good teams this season. He had a good game against Milwaukee early. He's also done well against Philly as well as New York Mets. So I think he has some good potential in this one. Even though he's facing a tougher matchup, he's a good GPP play today, though he's fairly expensive. Dan Kramer for Baltimore is also interesting today against St. Louis. The matchup is good. He's had 4 straight top tier games. He should do pretty good here. The question is if he can score over 25 fantasy points or not. But he's cheaper than most of the others I've already mentioned, and he has solid enough upside to be a viable option today. Then we'll look at Taj Bradley for Tampa Bay. Now, he does face a tough matchup against Boston, but he has only faced the Red Sox and the Yankees so far this season, and he's been over 19 fantasy points in both games. So I do think he has some potential here, though the strikeout rate has to stay up. And he is risky because he can have, if he doesn't get the strikeouts, not only that, he's also just faced Boston already, so they may do better against him the second time around. So that's why he's a GPP play, but he's also somewhat of an extreme GPP play. Then we'll look at Marcus Stroman, who is an extreme GPP play. He's got a good, decent matchup against Seattle. He's been very up and down so far this season. He's high risk with a low floor, but he's got a good ceiling, and he's very contrarian today. He's not somebody that I'm going to roster a lot, but he definitely has some potential to have a decent game. And then a Hail Mary play is Ross for Milwaukee against Miami. Miami's been absolutely terrible so far. I look for him to have some opportunity to have a good game here, which he's done a few times this season. As long as he can score over 15 or 16 fantasy points, he can pay off here. And he's actually done that a few times, so he's definitely capable. If he can get enough strikeouts, if he can get 5 or more strikeouts, he can definitely pay off at this position. Though I do like a couple Miami bats against him, I do think he's a viable play, even though he does carry some risk. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into our bets. Um, Obviously, catchers first here. This position is actually very solid today. We have four really good choices, and I think that and they're in different price ranges, so they definitely draw a lot of upside. William Contreras for Milwaukee has been one of the best catchers on the season. Obviously, his price is paid is way up, but he does draw a viable upside in this matchup, and he's got absolutely fantastic situational stats. I do think he's risky though because of his price, but he's definitely one of the top plays for this position. Ryan Jeffers' price continues to rise, and that's partially because he's hitting home runs. He's hit the ball pretty well so far this season. The home runs are really helping, and he's uh, got some really good upside in this matchup against Washington. I think he's a very good play, though he's a little bit pricey as well. So he's definitely risky. But if you can afford it, then he's definitely somebody I would consider. Gary Sanchez for Milwaukee is also in play today. Now, if he draws a start, he'll be somebody I would consider today. They've been starting him and Contreras both, one with the DH, and so I do like his potential here, um, just because he's hitting the ball pretty well and with some power, and he's a guy that does have that upside in this matchup. And then Cal Raleigh is also in play for Seattle. Now he's kind of a one-off option, but he has hit the ball pretty well lately. He draws really good metrics for this game, and he has a good price. So obviously we have three different price ranges there for you to consider, and you probably just want to fit in whoever fits based on your other batters at this point. Looking at first base here, this position is really rough today. I didn't really like much anything at this position at all, but I do have a few plays to consider. Otani being the top overall option, though he's very hard to roster at his price point, and he doesn't have the best metrics today compared to other days. But Pasquanto for Kansas City does have decent metrics today. Like I said, nobody at this position is jumping off the page, but he is a decent option, and he's priced okay. I wish he was a little bit cheaper than that. But we do have a couple value plays for you to consider. One being Josh Bell for Miami. Now his matchup here is not ideal, and he does have decent metrics for this game, but he's high risk, high reward. But he's cheap enough that he can be kind of a Hail Mary play at the position. Carlos oops, Santana from Minnesota. He might be my favorite play at this position. Despite the fact that he has not hit the ball well at all this season, he does draw good metrics for this game. And they're not great, but they're good, and so he is a viable play. Joey Gallo would be the other guy that I would consider as a one-off play here, though he's extremely risky as he's got a tougher matchup here against Lopez. Looking at second base, this position's fairly rough as well, but we do have two value plays that we can consider here. Jose Altuve is the best option by a lot. He does draw really good metrics. He's very expensive today, though he's hit the ball well and has home run upside. He also hit a home run in the last game, so I think he's viable here. But I do have two value plays that we can consider today, which can help you pay up at other positions. One being Joey Ortiz for Milwaukee at just $3,500. He's had some really monster games throughout the season so far, and he does draw good metrics here, so I think he's a viable play. And then he can also play at third base. Montecito from Milwaukee is also dirt cheap. Now, he has metrics here. He hasn't done much to start the season since he started playing, but he definitely draws some potential today with his upside. He's just been somewhat risky. He does get stolen base potential as well, which definitely helps his fantasy potential. If he can get on base, he can do something there. So he's very Hail Mary-ish, but he definitely has some potential on this one. Moving to third base, this position is a little bit better than second or first, with Rafael Devers being the top overall guy. He's not overpriced today, really, and he's hitting the ball extremely well lately. He draws absolutely fantastic metrics, and it looks like he's had 5 straight games with home runs. So uh, the metrics here are solid, and he definitely has that potential again. Looking at the value plays at this position, Jake Burger is a good one-off from Miami. He definitely draws good metrics for this game. Even though Miami struggled, he's probably one of the better plays from Miami today if you were going to use anybody, but he definitely has some risk as he's not hitting the ball well at all. Ortiz and Montecero that I just mentioned can also play at this position. But I also like Miguel Garcia for Kansas City. He might be my favorite play at this position simply because he has a lot of upside and he's hitting the ball very well lately. Now, he's not hitting as well as Devers is, but he definitely draws good metrics for this game. And he's $700 cheaper than Devers, so that helps. Looking at shortstop, this position is decent but expensive. The value plays are okay, but they're not great. They're better than first and second base, though. But we'll start with our shortstops and Bobby Witt Jr., Mookie Betts, and C.J. Abrams. They all have really good potential today. Abrams is a good one-off for West Washington, but I think Betts or Witt Jr. don't both have a ton of upside in this matchup, in these matchups. But I do have some value plays I like. One being Carlos Correa. I think Minnesota is a sneaky stack today, and I think they're going to be a viable team, especially because they're priced nice and fair. Pena is a little bit overpriced today, but he's hit the ball very well so far this season, and he draws good matchup metrics here. Maybe in outfielders, this position is kind of all over the place. I don't really love it, but I think there's enough options that you can kind of mix and match guys. So Chisholm Jr. is going to be the top overall play for Miami, though he does carry a lot of risk here. I also like Hal Tucker and Alvarez. I would say try to utilize one of these guys if you are going to go with the Houston stack at least, and then Soto or Judge as another as for the Yankees. They both have some good upside in this one as well. The value plays here are not that great, but we do have some. Byron Buxton. Let's see, Buxton has some really good upside here for $4,400. He's hit the ball fairly well this season so far, and he does draw good metrics, but he definitely carries some risk today. I do think Minnesota is a viable stack, though. Toscar Hernandez looks absolutely phenomenal for the Dodgers today. He's a guy that's very situational, and when I see the metrics line up in his favor, I usually like to use him. And he definitely draws good potential today, though he's fairly expensive. But I think you could use him over Freddie Freeman or Otani in an LA Dodger stack. Josh Lowe for Tampa Bay is a very good one-off option for them. He's the only guy on the team that I really like a lot today, and he definitely draws good metrics, but he's definitely risky, and I don't think Tampa Bay is going to do much else. Lars Nootbaar is interesting for St. Louis. It's kind of a contrarian play. Riley Green looks interesting for Detroit. I think Detroit's actually a decent stack, though it's not as cheap as it has been, and so that is a concern. But Jarren Duran for Boston is also very interesting today. He's really hit the ball well lately, and I do think he has improved his hitting so far. Chorio for Milwaukee is a nice cheap play at this position that has some upside today. If you go with a Milwaukee stack, he's definitely somebody I would consider. Kerry Carpenter is another guy from Detroit who I like. I think the outfield for Detroit looks pretty solid. It's just kind of getting out of the outfield is really going to struggle with in a Detroit type stack, but they definitely look interesting. And then De La Cruz for Miami is also interesting for at $4,100. He's a little bit overpriced though, so he's definitely worth a look, but he's definitely a little risky because I don't like Miami very much. Looking at our sub $3,000 plays, so Monsatero, who I mentioned from Milwaukee, is the top overall guy. He can play second or third base. That gives him a lot of potential, and he's just $2,300. So even if he doesn't do much, he won't hurt you too bad because you can pay up other positions. Owen Miller from Milwaukee is a good contrarian option at sub 3,000 as well. Though he's definitely risky. He's not somebody that has a lot of upside, and I don't think I'll include him in a Milwaukee stack unless I just need to save money in a lot of ways. Looking at Otto Lopez for Miami, he's kind of a good one-off for Miami as a cheap play, though he can play second or third base, so I would go with Monsatero more than him, but he definitely is a good contrarian option away from him. Kyle Farmer also fits that, and he does have good metrics for this game, so I think he's a viable choice, though he doesn't have as much upside as some of the other guys I've already mentioned. I do think he does fit in a Minnesota stack, however. And then Canzone for Seattle also looks like a kind of Hail Mary-ish play in the outfield as a one-off sub 3,000 play. Obviously, the sub 3,000 plays are not great today, but there's just not much to choose from that really has much upside on the slate. Let's look at our stacks here. So we have some really good stacks on this one. I do like this as a stack. I do like these top three: the Dodgers, Houston, Kansas City. I also like the next four with Minnesota, Detroit, New York Yankees, and Milwaukee. These are very contrarian stacks, but my gosh, they look pretty decent today. So I think these are kind of sneaky. You could even mix and match these stacks a little bit. Go with like a Minnesota, Detroit stack, kind of, and then maybe mix in a Yankee or a Milwaukee Brewer. And it's kind of a contrarian way to be, but I do think these top seven stacks are really good, and they do draw a lot of potential. If we get past those ones, though, the Miami through Arizona stacks, these are very weak stacks today. I think the pitchers in these games are going to be against these teams are probably going to be good, and that's going to limit a lot of the upside of stacking these teams. But they do have some one-off options. Obviously, Chisholm Jr., Lowe, uh, Baltimore is a tough team to not do good against, or to do well against as a pitcher, I should say. And then for St. Louis, this they have a couple guys. Boston is kind of a sneaky stack today as well, as is Seattle, who do have some upside guys. But I do think I'm avoiding these last three, the Angels, Nationals, and Arizona, because they are pretty rough on this one. So, but you know, these expensive stacks at the top are going to be hard, but if you get these middle stacks, I think this is the best looking place to be right now. At least at this point, I think these stacks are going to be the most favorable to have good outcomes on the slate. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.